I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the warm, dusty scent of a dirt playground on a summer evening, or the crisp, sharp smell of a newly ironed blue school uniform on a September morning. Can you hear the distant, crackling voice of a football announcer coming from a tiny transistor radio on a sleepy Sunday? Welcome back, my friend. Today, we are going to take a slow, beautiful walk down memory lane. We are going to revisit 20 forgotten habits and daily rituals from the Greece of the 1970s and 1980s. These are not just objects or old routines. They are the very heartbeat of our youth. We will remember how we lived, how we loved, and how we found immense joy in the simplest of things. And please, stay with me until the very end, because the last memory we will share is perhaps the most magical, a simple beam of light that brought entire families together in the dark. Before we begin our journey, let us remember how different the world felt back then. Time did not just move slower, it had a completely different texture. We did not have screens in our pockets, demanding our constant attention. We had to wait for things, and in that waiting, there was a profound sense of anticipation and value. If you wanted to talk to a friend, you had to memorize their number and hope they were home. If you wanted to hear your favorite song, you had to wait by the radio with a cassette tape. Today, people often think that without modern technology, our lives were somehow poorer or less connected. But we know the truth. Our emotional lives were infinitely richer. Our connections were built on eye contact, shared meals, and the physical presence of our neighbors. We lived with less money and fewer conveniences, but our homes were overflowing with genuine hospitality, loud laughter, and a deep, unbreakable sense of community. Now, let us gently unwrap those memories, one by one. Let us start by remembering the Sunday ritual of the neighborhood bakery. In the 1970s and 80s, Sunday morning was not just a day of the week, it was a symphony of glorious aromas. Before the sun was fully up, mothers and grandmothers would prepare a heavy, round aluminium pan filled with lamb and potatoes, beautifully drenched in olive oil, fresh lemon juice, and oregano. But the true magic was that we did not roast it in our own kitchens. The journey to the local baker, the fornos, was a sacred weekly duty, very often proudly assigned to the children. You would carefully balance that heavy, cold pan, walking down the quiet street, feeling the cool morning breeze on your face. The baker's large oven served as a communal hearth for the entire street. He would take your family's pan, slide a little numbered metal tag onto its edge, and hand you the matching token. A few hours later, after the church service ended, you would return. The mingled smell of roasted meat and freshly baked bread was utterly intoxicating. Carrying that hot, sizzling pan back home was a true test of endurance and temptation, knowing that every house on your street was sharing the exact same Sunday tradition. Now, let us remember the profound, almost sacred silence of the afternoon siesta. In the summer months, the hours between 3 and 5 in the afternoon were governed by an unspoken, strict law of absolute quiet. The Mediterranean sun would be beating down on the asphalt outside, creating shimmering waves of intense heat. But inside, the house was transformed into a cool, darkened sanctuary. Mothers would firmly close the wooden shutters, leaving only thin, dusty slivers of golden light to pierce through the darkness. As a child, you were forced to lie down in your room, and making a sound was strictly forbidden. You would lie there, listening to the rhythmic, hypnotic ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, or the distant, muffled sound of a lone car passing by. To pass the time, you might secretly read a comic book under the thin cotton sheet, straining your eyes in the dim light. It felt like a punishment back then, an eternity of boredom. But looking back today, that enforced stillness was a beautiful pause button on life. It gave the hard-working adults a much-needed rest, and it taught us children how to be comfortable in our own quiet company. Let us turn the pages of our memory to the schoolyard. If you grew up before 1982, you surely remember the iconic blue school uniform, the podia. It was far more than just a piece of clothing. It was a powerful symbol of an entire era of Greek education. For the girls, it was a dark blue pinafore paired with a crisp, detachable white collar. For the boys, it was a similar blue tunic. Every September, mothers would iron those white collars with immense care, ensuring they were stiff and perfectly shaped. The pockets were delightfully deep, often holding a handkerchief, a chewed pencil, or a handful of colourful glass marbles. Wearing that blue uniform meant that the moment you stepped through the school gates, everyone was completely equal. It did not matter if you came from a wealthy family or a struggling one. In that sea of blue cotton, you were all simply students sharing the same journey. When the law was finally passed to abolish the mandatory uniform, a wave of modern fashion flooded the schools, but something deeply unifying and innocent was lost forever. Today, looking at those old black and white class photographs evokes a profound sense of shared identity. We cannot talk about the summers of our youth without tasting the salty pumpkin seeds of the outdoor cinema. The Traana cinema was the ultimate neighborhood escape. You would walk in and instantly hear the familiar crunch of white gravel beneath your shoes. The air was always thick with a magical mixture of blooming night jasmine, burning mosquito coils, and the sweet smoke of cheap cigarettes. You would take your seat on those wobbly canvas director chairs, looking up at the large white screen framed by the dark, starry sky. Before the movie even started, you had to visit the small canteen to buy a paper cone filled with pasatempos, those roasted pumpkin and sunflower seeds that required absolute skill to crack open with your front teeth. Halfway through the film, the projectionist would always pause the reel for an intermission. The lights would flicker on and everyone would stretch their legs, discussing the plot and greeting neighbours across the aisles. It was not just about watching a film, it was a communal gathering, a place where the whole neighbourhood breathed together under the warm summer night. Do you recall the refreshing, watery ritual of washing the balconies? In the concrete apartment buildings of the cities, the marble balconies were considered an extension of the living room, and keeping them spotless was a matter of immense household pride. Late in the summer afternoons, when the sun began to lose its fierce bite, mothers and grandmothers would connect long rubber hoses to the bathroom faucets. They would drag them out to the balcony, armed with a sturdy broom and a bucket of soapy water. The sound of the water rushing over the hot marble was incredibly soothing, releasing a fresh, earthy scent into the stifling city air. As a child, you would jump around bare feet, trying to avoid the soapy waves, or sometimes deliberately splashing through them to cool down. As the water cascaded down the drainage pipes to the street below, women would lean over the railings to gossip and share the daily news with the neighbours doing the exact same chore next door. It was a chore, yes, but it was also a daily baptism that washed away the heat and the dust of the long day. Let us take a walk to the corner of the street and visit the Periptoro, the traditional Greek kiosk. Back then, the kiosk was the glowing centre of the neighbourhood's universe. It was a tiny, yellow wooden box packed with absolute wonders. Do you remember seeing dozens of colourful magazines and newspapers clipped to strings, fluttering like flags in the wind? The owner knew everyone by their first name, knew all the local secrets, and served as the unofficial guardian of the street. As a child, going to the kiosk with a few heavy drachmas in your pocket felt like a grand adventure. You would stand on your tiptoes to peer inside the small window, trying to choose between a chocolate bar with the collectible stickers or a small carton of cold chocolate milk. Sometimes your father or uncle would send you there just to buy a single, loose cigarette, which was a perfectly normal transaction at the time. The smell of roasted nuts warming under the small light bulb, the heavy clinking of coins, and the friendly nod of the kiosk owner made that tiny square of space the most reliable and comforting spot in the entire neighbourhood. Think back to the ultimate gesture of Greek hospitality, the traditional spoon suite, or gliko tou koutaliou. In those days, you could not simply drop by a house without being immediately served a treat. The moment a guest sat on the sofa, the lady of the house would disappear into the kitchen, returning a few minutes later holding a small, perfectly polished silver tray. On it would rest a tiny, delicate glass plate containing exactly 1 spoonful of homemade fruit preserve, gleaming like a precious jewel. It could be bitter orange, sour cherry, or baby eggplant, bathed in a thick, shiny syrup. Next to it stood a tall, sweating glass of ice-cold water. The ritual demanded that you eat the sweet slowly, savoring the intense sugar rush, and then wash it down with a long drink of the freezing water. It was a beautiful contrast of textures and temperatures. The fruits were painstakingly prepared at the end of every summer, demanding hours of peeling, boiling, and resting. That tiny spoon of sweetness was not just dessert, it was a profound symbol of respect, care, and the deep-rooted pride our mothers took in their welcoming homes. Can you hear the heavy, echoing shout of the Iceman coming down the street? Before electric refrigerators became a staple in every single household, keeping food cold required the daily visit of the pagazzis. He would drive his small, open truck through the neighborhoods, calling out to the housewives. You would run outside and watch in awe as he used giant, intimidating metal tongs to grip a massive, crystal-clear block of solid ice. He would sling a thick piece of burlap over his shoulder to protect his back from the freezing wetness and carry the block up the stairs. Back inside the house, the ice was carefully placed into the top compartment of the wooden icebox. Throughout the day, you could hear the slow, rhythmic dripping of the melting water falling into the collection tray at the bottom, a tray that had to be emptied constantly. For us kids, the best part was when the Iceman chipped away small, sharp shards of ice. We would snatch them up from the hot asphalt and suck on them like they were the most delicious popsicles in the world, grateful for the sudden sharp burst of winter in the middle of July. Let us fast forward a little to the era of homemade cassette mixtapes. If you were a teenager in the 80s, you know the absolute dedication required to capture your favorite music. You did not have a screen to instantly stream a song. Instead, you had a bulky radio cassette player and a stack of blank tapes. You would sit by the speaker for hours, finger hovering nervously over the red record button, waiting for the radio DJ to finally play the track you loved. The moment you heard the opening notes, you slammed the button down. The greatest frustration, of course, was when the DJ decided to talk over the beautiful intro or the fading outro of the song, permanently ruining your masterpiece. We would write the track lists by hand on the tiny cardboard inserts, using our best handwriting. And who could ever forget the tragic moment when the tape player would chew up the magnetic ribbon? You had to gently pull it out and use a hexagonal pencil, twisting it patiently for minutes to wind the delicate tape back into the plastic casing. It made the music physical, tangible, and incredibly precious. Do you remember the dust and the freedom of the Alana? Before every empty lot was paved over to build concrete apartment blocks, neighborhoods had these patches of untamed dirt and wild weeds. The Alana was our kingdom. Every afternoon, after finishing our homework, we would rush out to meet our friends. We played endless, intense games of hide and seek, or the dodgeball game we called apples. The boys would crouch in the dirt, drawing circles to play marbles, arguing passionately over the rules and the valuable glass spheres. Our knees were constantly scraped, painted bright red with iodine, and our shoes were permanently coated in a thick layer of grey dust. There were no organised playdates or adults supervising our every move. We learned to resolve our own conflicts, invent our own rules, and build our own social hierarchies. The only clock we had was the sun. We played until the streetlights flickered on, buzzing in the twilight, and we heard the loud, familiar voices of our mothers leaning out of the windows, calling our names to come home for dinner. Let us step inside the smoky, loud, and uniquely masculine world of the traditional Caffenio. The local coffee house was the absolute sanctuary for the grandfathers and fathers of the neighborhood. Pushing open the wooden doors, you were instantly hit by a dense wall of cigarette smoke and the rich, roasted aroma of Greek coffee boiling slowly in a small copper pot over hot sand. The soundtrack of the Caffenio is something you can never forget. It was the sharp, aggressive clack of wooden backgammon pieces hitting the board, accompanied by loud arguments over politics and football. Underneath that noise was the constant, rhythmic clicking of amber worry beads, the komboloi, slipping smoothly through the weathered fingers of the older men. They would sit on those uncomfortable wooden chairs with woven straw seats for hours, sipping water, reading the daily newspaper, and watching the world go by. It was their internet, their social media, and their therapy group all rolled into one. As a child, being sent there by your grandmother to fetch your grandfather felt like stepping into a secret society. Now, let us recall the heavy, woolly embrace of the Flucati rugs. Almost every Greek home had these thick, shaggy, woven wool carpets, usually in brilliant white or vibrant red. They were incredibly warm and soft to sit on during the cold winter months, but maintaining them was an act of extreme physical labor. At the end of winter, before putting them away, they had to be washed. This was a monumental task. The rugs were dragged into the bathtub or taken to a nearby river. Once wet, a single Flucati absorbed so much water it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Women would stomp on them with bare feet in the soapy water, trying to squeeze out the dirt. Then came the drying. They were hoisted over the balcony railings, dripping heavy streams of water onto the sidewalk below. Once they were finally dry, mothers would take a special wooden stick and beat the rugs violently to fluff up the wool fibers again. The smell of damp sheep wool filled the house, a smell that meant winter was officially over and the light, breezy days of spring had finally arrived. Think back to the heavy, intimidating presence of the rotary dial telephone. It usually sat proudly on a small crocheted doily in the hallway, tethered to the wall by a tangled curly cord. Making a phone call was a deliberate, physical act. You had to place your finger in the hole, pull the heavy plastic dial all the way to the metal stopper, and listen to the mechanical whirring sound as it spun back into place. But the most unforgettable detail of the 70s and 80s was the physical lock. Because long-distance calls were incredibly expensive, parents would often attach a small metal padlock through the number 1 hole on the dial. This prevented the children, or anyone else, from dialing numbers that started with 0, effectively blocking any calls outside the local area. When the phone rang, its loud metallic bell echoed through the entire house, causing a rush to see who it was. You could not see the caller's ID. Every time you picked up the heavy receiver, it was a genuine mystery, a surprise waiting on the other end of the line. Let us drift away to the magical summer nights spent in the village. Leaving the hot, suffocating city behind, August meant returning to our roots, to the ancestral stone houses in the mountains or by the sea. Because air conditioning was practically non-existent, sleeping indoors was often impossible. So, we took our mattresses and thin cotton sheets outside, onto the flat concrete rooftops or the wide verandas. The night sky in the village was a revelation, thick with thousands of brilliant, glittering stars that you could never see in the city. The only light came from the moon and the glowing tip of the green, spiraling mosquito coils burning in a saucer, filling the air with their distinctive, smoky scent. The silence was deep but never empty. It was filled with the deafening, rhythmic chorus of millions of cicadas and crickets. Lying there in the dark, surrounded by cousins and siblings, listening to the adults whispering stories in the yard below, you felt an overwhelming sense of safety and belonging. We fell asleep under the vast universe, feeling deeply connected to the earth. Do you remember the end of summer ritual of making Traana and homemade tomato sauce? Late August was a time of intense communal kitchen labor aimed at pursuing the pantry for the long winter ahead. The entire house smelled of sour milk, crushed wheat, and overripe, sweet tomatoes. Making Traana was an art passed down through generations. The mixture was prepared, kneaded, and then passed through large metal sieves to create tiny, coarse grains. The most iconic sight was walking into a room or up to the terrace and seeing pristine white bedsheets spread out on the floor, covered entirely with the drying, golden grains of Traana. You had to leave the windows open for the breeze, but constantly guard it against insects and birds. At the same time, massive pots of crushed tomatoes boiled for hours on the stove, reducing into a thick, rich red paste that was carefully sealed in glass jars. When the cold rain of January finally fell, Eating a hot bowl of that sour Traana soup or tasting that sun-kissed tomato sauce instantly brought the warmth of the Greek summer back into the house. Let us take a seat in the warm evening breeze and remember the beautiful tradition of the Vegara. Before television completely dominated our evenings, the end of the day belonged to the neighborhood sidewalk. As dusk settled and the fierce heat broke, women would carry their lightweight kitchen chairs or woven stools right out their front doors and onto the pavement. They would sit in a loose circle, enjoying the cool draft. Their hands were never idle. They would sit there effortlessly peeling mountains of green beans, snapping the ends off with a rhythmic click, or knitting thick winter sweaters. This was the ultimate social network of the era. They shared recipes, exchanged local news, discussed family troubles, and kept a watchful eye on us children playing street games just a few feet away. The men might join later, pulling up chairs and smoking cigarettes. It was a daily, spontaneous gathering that required no invitations. It wove the neighborhood into a tight, supportive family, proving that the best conversations happen outside, under the fading evening light. We absolutely must talk about the intricate white-lace doilies known as semidakia. If there was a flat surface in a Greek home during the 70s and 80s, it was guaranteed to have a handmade doily placed upon it. They were on the dining tables, the nightstands, the arms of the sofas, the wooden stereo cabinets, and most famously, draped carefully over the top of the bulky, boxy television set. These pieces of lace were not just decorations. They were the physical manifestation of a mother's endless love and anxiety for her daughter's future. They were a crucial part of the proika, the dowry. Women spent countless hours, their eyes straining under small lamps, armed with thin metal hooks and spools of pristine white thread, crocheting complex floral patterns. Opening the dowry chest and seeing stacks of perfectly ironed, starched doilies was a profound point of pride. Even though we, as children, often found them annoying because they slipped and slid everywhere, today, touching that rough, hand-woven cotton instantly connects us to the extraordinary patience and devotion of our mothers and grandmothers. Can you smell the toasted sesame seeds warming in the morning air? Before the era of fancy coffee shops and imported pastries, the absolute king of the Greek breakfast on the go was the simple, humble koulouri. The koulouris, the street vendor, was a fixture at every major intersection, bus stop and school entrance. He stood behind a small, folding wooden stand, or simply carried a massive, wide yellow wicker basket, balanced perfectly on his arm, or even on his head. For just a few drachmas, you could buy this perfect ring of dough, baked until golden brown and encrusted with hundreds of roasted sesame seeds. It was the ultimate comfort food for a rushing student or a tired office worker. You would break off pieces as you walked, the crunchy exterior giving way to the soft, slightly sweet bread inside, while sesame seeds rained down onto your jacket. It was cheap, it was filling, and it tasted exactly like a crisp, optimistic morning in the city. The vendors' loud, melodic calls of fresh and warm echoed through the bustling morning streets, a comforting daily guarantee. Let us tune into the crackling excitement of the Sunday afternoon football match. Before satellite television brought every game into our living rooms in high definition, following your favourite team was an exercise in pure imagination and auditory focus. The lifeline to the stadium was a small battery-powered transistor radio, often encased in a worn-out, brown leather cover. On Sundays, you would see men everywhere sitting on their balconies, walking in the park, or standing outside the Caffenio with the radio pressed tightly against their ear. The signal would frequently fade into static, forcing you to constantly adjust the long metallic antenna. The voice of the sports announcer was legendary, speaking at lightning speed, rising to a frantic, screaming pitch whenever the ball approached the penalty box. You could not see the grass, the players, or the ball. You had to vividly picture the entire match in your mind based on the dramatic tone of the announcer's voice. When a goal was scored, the simultaneous roar of joy or groan of despair from all the neighbouring balconies proved that everyone was listening to the exact same frequency. Finally, let us return to the most magical, heartwarming ritual of all, the family slide projector show. Long before digital photos could be swiped endlessly on a glowing screen, capturing a memory cost money and required great care. You only had 24 or 36 exposures on a roll of film, so every click of the camera had to mean something. After returning from a summer vacation, you had to wait weeks to get the film developed into slides. When the evening finally came to view them, it was an event. The living room lights were turned off, and the heavy projector was placed on a stack of books. The loud, mechanical clunk of the carousel, turning the first slide, was pure theatre. A brilliant beam of light cut through the dusty air, projecting our sunburnt faces, the blue Aegean Sea, and our smiling grandparents onto a blank white wall. We sat together in the dark, bathed in the glow of our own history, laughing at the blurry shots and marvelling at the bright, vivid colours. Those photographs were not hidden in a phone. They were monumental, painting the walls of our home with the undeniable proof that we were happy, we were young, and we were together. As the light from that old projector fades, we are left with a beautiful, lingering warmth. Looking back at these 20 rituals, we realise something profound. We do not just miss the old objects, the heavy rotary phones, or the loud transistor radios. We miss the feeling of time standing still. We miss the tight, unbreakable bonds of our neighbourhoods, the physical touch of our mother's hands, and the innocent simplicity of a life lived face to face rather than screen to screen. These memories are the precious dowry we carry in our hearts, a testament to an era that shaped who we are today. If this journey brought a tear to your eye or a smile to your face, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a warm like so we can continue to preserve our beautiful history together. Now, I turn to you, my friend. Look deep into your own memories. What is the one specific habit, smell, or sound from your childhood in Greece that you miss more than anything else? Please write your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I cannot wait to share these memories with you.